My daughter left me with my 3 grandkids, and now, after 13 years of raising them as my own, she's standing in my living room screaming at me, pointing her finger in my face, and calling me a kidnapper. A kidnapper! The same woman who begged me to keep those babies safe when she disappeared without a trace now looks at me like I'm some criminal. And the worst part, my grandkids, the ones I've fed, clothed, tucked into bed every night, are standing right there, watching their mother accuse me of stealing them. That's where I was, frozen in shock, with her words still echoing in the walls of my house. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. My oldest grandson, Matthew, looked at me with wide eyes full of confusion. My middle one, Claire, clutched my arm so tight her nails dug into my skin. And little Sam, well, he wasn't so little anymore at 13, but he just stood there, pale, like the whole world had tilted sideways. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her, "How dare you?" But the words got stuck in my throat. All I could feel was the weight of 13 years rushing back like a tidal wave. 13 years of diapers and school plays, broken bones and birthday cakes, late-night fevers and morning cuddles. 13 years of holding a family together when she chose not to. And now she stood there with fury in her eyes, claiming I'd taken them away from her. But here's the thing, you don't just jump from love to betrayal without a story behind it. And ours started 13 years earlier, with a knock at my door that changed everything. It was a cold November night. I remember because the leaves had almost all fallen, leaving the branches outside looking like twisted, reaching hands. I was sitting in my recliner, knitting a blanket I swore I'd finish for Christmas that year, when headlights flashed across my window. I frowned. It was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Then came the knock. When I opened the door, there she was, my daughter, Emily. But this wasn't the Emily I remembered. This wasn't the bright, laughing girl who once dreamed of being a nurse. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face pale, and she looked so thin it made my chest ache. Behind her were 3 small children, huddled together like little birds in the cold. Matthew, just 4 years old, held Claire's tiny hand while she clutched a blanket. And baby Sam was in a car seat, fast asleep, his cheeks red from the chilly air. "Mom," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I can't do this anymore. Please, take them." I blinked, not sure I understood. "What do you mean, take them?" She didn't answer right away. She just pushed the car seat toward me and looked over her shoulder like someone might be chasing her. "I can't explain right now. But if I don't leave, if I don't go tonight, something bad will happen. Please, Mom. You're the only one I trust." I should have demanded answers. I should have grabbed her arm and begged her not to go. But all I could think about were those kids, their wide eyes, their trembling little bodies. So I took the car seat, lifted baby Sam into my arms, and pulled Matthew and Claire inside. When I turned back, Emily was already halfway down the porch steps. "Wait!" I called. "Emily, what's going on? Where are you going?" She stopped for just a second, her shoulders shaking like she was holding back sobs. "I'll come back," she whispered. "I promise." And then she was gone. Her car roared down the road, and I stood there in the doorway with 3 little ones clinging to me, wondering what on earth had just happened. That was the night my life changed. That was the night I went from being grandma to being mom again, whether I wanted to or not. At first, I told myself it was temporary. A week, maybe 2. Emily would get whatever mess she was in sorted out, and she'd come back for her kids. But the weeks turned into months. The months turned into years. And still, no word from Emily. Those early days were hard. I was in my late 50s, already dealing with arthritis in my knees and a heart that wasn't as strong as it used to be. But diapers don't wait for arthritis, and toddlers don't care if your back aches. I had to step up. The first extreme test came just a few months later. It was flu season, and little Sam got so sick I thought I'd lose him. His fever wouldn't break, and he coughed until his tiny body shook. I rushed him to the ER, clutching him against my chest the whole way. The doctor said it was pneumonia, and for a week, I hardly slept. I sat by his hospital bed, praying harder than I ever had in my life. When he finally opened his eyes, looked at me, and whispered "Grandma," I broke down sobbing. In that moment, I knew I wasn't just filling in for Emily. I was their anchor now. Life became a rhythm. School drop-offs, soccer games, scraped knees, Christmas mornings. Money was tight, but somehow, we made it. I picked up extra hours cleaning houses, stretching every dollar until it squeaked. Some nights I went without dinner so the kids could eat, but I never let them know. They just saw a smiling grandma who packed their lunches with little notes inside. There were beautiful highs, too. Like the time Matthew won his spelling bee, and I cheered so loud the whole auditorium stared. Or when Claire painted a picture of our family and handed it to me with the words, "You're the best mummy and grandma ever." Or the night Sam crawled into my bed after a nightmare, whispering, "Don't leave me, Grandma. Promise." I always promised, and I always kept it. But not everyone understood. Some neighbors gossiped, whispering about why my daughter wasn't around. A few even suggested I call child services, but the thought of losing them to strangers tore me apart. I was their family. I was their safe place. 13 years went by like that. 13 years of building a life, of raising those kids into bright, kind, wonderful teenagers. I thought the past was behind us. I thought Emily was gone forever. Until the day she came back. It was a sunny afternoon. The kids were home from school, and I was in the kitchen making spaghetti. The doorbell rang, and I wiped my hands on a towel before answering. When I opened the door, my heart nearly stopped. There she was, Emily. Older, yes, and worn in ways I couldn't quite explain, but still her. My daughter. Before I could even say her name, she pushed past me, stormed into the living room, and shouted, "Where are my kids?" The kids rushed out of their rooms, staring in shock. "Mom," Matthew whispered. And that's when it happened. That's when she turned on me, eyes blazing, and screamed, "You kidnapped them. You stole them from me." My knees nearly gave out. I gripped the edge of the counter just to stay standing. 13 years of sacrifice, of love, of sleepless nights, and she dared to call it kidnapping. And right then, before I could even answer, something happened that shook the room even harder. The word kidnapper hung in the air like poison. I could feel it seep into the walls of my home, the same home that had been full of laughter and bedtime stories for over a decade. My hands trembled as I clutched the counter, not because I was guilty, but because of the sheer audacity of hearing that word from my own daughter. You can't mean that," I whispered, my throat so tight it hurt to speak. Emily's eyes darted around the room, landing on Matthew, then Claire, then Sam. She pointed at them, her finger shaking. "They are my children. You had no right to keep them from me. 13 years, Mom. 13 years. Matthew stepped forward, his voice steady but unsure. "Mom, where have you been?" Emily's face softened for a split second, but then hardened again as she turned back to me. "Don't listen to her," she told them. "She kept you from me. She wanted you all for herself." I wanted to scream that it wasn't true. I wanted to remind her of that night, how she had left them shivering on my porch, begging me to take them. But the kids were watching, and my heart broke at the confusion in their faces. "Emily," I said carefully, "you left. You asked me to take care of them. Do you remember that night?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, and I could see the storm brewing in her eyes. "That's not how it happened," she snapped. "You twisted it. You always twist everything." The tension in the room was suffocating. Claire, who was usually the quiet peacemaker, burst out, "That's not true. Grandma raised us. She never lied to us." She grabbed my arm, clinging the same way she had that first night 13 years ago. Emily flinched as if Claire had slapped her. Sam, my sweet boy, just stood there frozen. His eyes darted between me and his mother, his lips pressed so tight they were turning white. I knew he didn't know what to believe. Before I could say another word, Emily's voice rose to a shriek. "You'll pay for this, Mom. I'll call the police. I'll tell them what you did. You'll go to jail for kidnapping." That was the moment the room exploded. Matthew shouted. Claire started crying. Sam slammed his fist against the wall, and my heart sank so low I thought it might never come back up again. And right as the shouting reached its peak, there was another knock at the door. Loud, demanding. The whole house fell silent. I swallowed hard, every muscle in my body tightening. Because deep down, I knew. Someone had already called the police. To understand why that moment shook me so deeply, you have to know how the 13 years leading up to it shaped not just me, but the kids too. The first year after Emily left was the hardest. I was in shock most days, just going through the motions of keeping everyone alive and fed. At night, I'd tuck the kids into bed, then sit by the window waiting for headlights that never came. I'd whisper to myself, she'll come back. She has to. But as days turned into months, I had to face reality. Those kids weren't waiting for her anymore. They were waiting for me. Money was always the biggest problem. I had a small pension from my late husband and a part-time cleaning job, but 3 growing kids needed more than I could stretch. I started working for a diner down the street, taking night shifts when the kids were asleep. My neighbor, sweet old Mrs. Patterson, would check in while I was gone. I remember one night when Matthew woke up sick while I was at work. Mrs. Patterson stayed with him until I rushed home. I found him curled up on the couch with a fever, and the guilt nearly crushed me. I promised him then that I'd never leave him alone again. From that night on, I juggled shifts in the mornings and afternoons, sacrificing sleep to make sure I was always home at night. The kids felt my sacrifices, even if they didn't fully understand them. They never asked for new toys or fancy clothes. They learned early on that hand-me-downs and thrift store finds were good enough. Sometimes Matthew would bring home extra snacks from school, proudly handing them to me like treasure. "Hey, Grandma, you didn't eat lunch today, did you?" Moments like that reminded me I wasn't just raising kids, I was shaping resilient, empathetic souls. But there were setbacks, too. Once, when Claire was in 2nd grade, a teacher pulled me aside and asked why her mom never came to parent-teacher conferences. I had to explain, with my cheeks burning, that I was both mom and grandma now. The teacher nodded kindly, but I saw the pity in her eyes. Then there was the time Sam asked, "Why doesn't Mommy love us?" I had to hold him so tightly, whispering, "She does love you, sweetheart. She's not able to take care of you right now." Inside, though, I was raging. How could Emily choose whatever path she was on over these beautiful children? How could she abandon them so completely? But even through the anger, I held on to kindness. I told myself, if I let bitterness in, it'll poison everything. So I kept showing the kids what love looked like: steady, patient, unshakable love. And for a while, that was enough. We built traditions. Friday movie nights with popcorn. Saturday mornings at the park. Homemade birthday cakes, even when the frosting was lopsided. The kids grew, not into broken shells, but into strong, bright individuals. Matthew became protective, always looking out for his siblings. Claire grew into an artist, filling the house with colorful drawings. Sam, sweet Sam, found joy in fixing things, always tinkering with broken toys or electronics. I thought we were safe. I thought the worst was behind us. But life has a way of reminding you that storms can return just when the sun feels warmest. The first sign came a year before Emily returned. Matthew, who was 16 by then, started asking questions. He wanted to know more about his mom. Did she ever try to call? Did she ever send letters? His voice was sharp, almost accusing. I told him the truth. No calls, no letters. But I could see the doubt in his eyes. Teenagers crave answers, and silence is the hardest truth of all. Then Claire, at 14, began struggling in school. She was quiet, withdrawn, drawing darker pictures. When I asked her what was wrong, she whispered, "Everyone else has a mom. Why don't I?" I hugged her tightly, wishing I could rewrite the past. But all I could say was, "You do have a mom. And you have me. You'll always have me." Sam, only 12 then, tried to keep the peace. He cracked jokes, smiled through the tension, but I knew he was just trying to keep us from falling apart. It was during that fragile time that Emily walked back into our lives. And now, with her screaming accusations in my living room, with a knock at the door shaking the walls, I realized the storm I'd feared most had finally arrived. I turned slowly toward the door. Each knock grew louder, sharper, like a drumbeat of doom. Emily crossed her arms, her chin high, as if daring me to answer it. "That's them," she hissed. "The police. And when they hear what you've done, you'll be taken away." Claire let out a sob. "No, they can't take Grandma away." She clung to me so tightly I could barely breathe. Matthew stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "Mom, stop this. You don't know what you're doing." But Emily didn't flinch. She just stayed at the door, waiting. And with a final, deafening knock, the moment came. I reached for the doorknob, my hand shaking, knowing that whatever waited on the other side would change everything once again. The knocking didn't stop. Each pound on the door felt like a hammer to my chest. My knees trembled, and I had to grip the counter just to keep from collapsing. For 13 years, I had done nothing but love and care for those kids, and now, because of my daughter's twisted story, I was about to be treated like a criminal. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move. When I opened the door, 2 police officers stood on my porch. One was tall with a stiff posture, his hand resting near his belt. The other looked younger, with tired eyes that softened just a little when he saw my face. The older officer said firmly, "We've received a report of a possible kidnapping. We need to ask you some questions." The word again, kidnapping. It stabbed me in the chest. Before I could speak, Emily rushed forward, pushing past me. "There they are," she cried, pointing at the kids. "Those are my children." She took them from me and refused to give them back. "Arrest her!" The room erupted into chaos again. Claire clung to me, sobbing. Matthew stepped in front of me like a shield. Sam looked ready to throw up. The younger officer raised a hand. "Let's calm down. Everyone, please, take a breath." "I will not calm down," Emily shrieked. "She's been keeping my kids from me for 13 years. 13 years. The older officer said, his voice measured. "We'll need to sort this out properly. For now, no one's being arrested. We just need to talk." He looked at me. "Can you step outside with us?" My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint. But I nodded, pried Claire's fingers gently from my arm, and stepped onto the porch. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I welcomed it. It cleared my head. The younger officer pulled out a notepad. "Can you tell us your side of the story?" So I did. I told them about that night 13 years ago, the knock at the door, the 3 little ones shivering in the cold. I told them how Emily begged me to take them, how she promised she'd come back but never did, how I had raised them since then, doctor visits, school, holidays, everything. The older officer listened carefully, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he asked, "Do you have any legal paperwork? Custody orders, guardianship papers?" That question hit me like a blow. Legal paperwork, guardianship. No, I didn't. I had always meant to look into it. But between working, raising the kids, and just trying to survive, it never got done. In my mind, I was their grandma, their mother figure. That had always been enough. My voice shook. "No, officer. I don't. But I have neighbors who can vouch for me. Teachers, doctors. Everyone knows I've raised them." The younger officer scribbled something in his notebook. "All right. We'll need to verify all that." The older one sighed. "This is going to get complicated." Complicated. That word terrified me. Because I knew, without papers, without proof, I was standing on shaky ground. When we stepped back inside, Emily had taken over the living room, her arms spread wide like she was reclaiming her territory. The kids were huddled together on the couch, their faces pale and stricken. The officer addressed her. We've heard your statement and your mother's. This isn't something we can resolve right here. We'll have to involve Child Protective Services to determine custody." Child Protective Services. The words made my stomach twist. Emily smiled, like she had already won. "No!" Claire shouted suddenly, her voice high and desperate. She jumped off the couch and stood between me and the officers. "You can't take us away from Grandma. She's our mom. She's the only mom we know." Her voice cracked on the last word, and it broke me. Matthew stood too, his fists clenched. "If you try to take us, we'll fight it. We're not leaving her." Sam said nothing, but he slid closer to me, his small hand slipping into mine. The younger officer looked torn. The older one cleared his throat. "We're not taking anyone tonight. But this case will be reviewed. Be prepared for a hearing." And just like that, they left, promising someone would be in touch. The silence after the door shut was deafening. Emily turned to the kids, her face softening. "Come on, babies. Pack your things. We're leaving." But none of them moved. Not one. Matthew glared at her. "We're not going anywhere with you." Claire shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "You left us." "Grandma didn't." Sam just whispered, "Please stop, Mom." Emily's face twisted with fury. "You see what she's done? She's poisoned you against me." She pointed at me, her fingers shaking with rage. "You'll regret this, Mom. You'll regret everything." And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. The next few days were a blur of fear and tension. I barely slept, waiting for another knock, another officer at the door. The kids were shaken too. Claire had nightmares and crawled into my bed almost every night. Matthew became angrier, snapping at everyone. Sam withdrew, spending hours in his room tinkering with broken gadgets, trying to drown out the noise of our unraveling world. I tried to stay calm for them. I cooked their favorite meals, told them everything would be okay, hugged them tighter than ever. But inside, I was terrified. One afternoon, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of old bills and letters. My hands shook as I tried to make sense of what to do. Did I need a lawyer? How would I even afford one? Would the courts listen to me without papers? Then I remembered something. Back when Sam was in the hospital with pneumonia, the doctor had made me sign paperwork as his guardian. Somewhere in my files, I still had copies. Maybe, just maybe, those papers could help prove I'd been the one responsible all these years. I spent hours digging through dusty boxes until I found them, yellowed with age, but still legible. I clutched them to my chest like they were gold. Maybe I had a chance. That night, when the kids were asleep, I sat by the window, staring at the stars. I whispered a prayer, not for myself, but for them. That they wouldn't be torn apart, that they'd stay safe. And for a little while, I let myself believe things would calm down. But peace never lasts long when storms are brewing. The next evening, as we sat down to dinner, headlights swept across the window. My stomach dropped. Matthew froze mid-bite. Claire's fork clattered to her plate. Sam whispered, "Not again." The car door slammed, and footsteps crunched up the walkway. Then came the knock. But this time, it wasn't the police. When I opened the door, a woman stood there in a crisp suit, holding a folder. She introduced herself with a firm smile. "Hello, I'm with Child Protective Services. I'm here to discuss a temporary placement for the children while we investigate." The words hit me harder than any accusation Emily had thrown. Temporary placement. Behind me, the kids gasped. And just like that, the nightmare deepened. The woman at the door stood tall and professional, her black blazer pressed sharp, her folder tucked neatly under one arm. She looked like someone who lived in a world of paperwork and rules, not in the messy chaos of raising children. Her voice was polite but firm, each word chosen with care. "Mrs. Carter," she said, my last name rolling off her tongue like a summons. "I'm here on behalf of Child Protective Services. We've received a report and need to assess the welfare of the children under your care." The room behind me went still. The clinking of forks, the hum of the refrigerator, everything seemed to stop. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might rattle the windows. Claire whispered from the table, "Grandma, who is that?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "Sweetheart, finish your dinner. It's just someone here to talk." But the woman didn't let me stall. She gave a clipped smile and added, "It would be best if we spoke privately." I wanted to slam the door, to tell her these were my grandkids, my responsibility, my life. But I knew how the system worked, or at least I thought I did. Refusing her wouldn't help, it would only make me look guilty. So I stepped aside, my stomach churning. "Come in." She walked into my home with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times before. Her eyes scanned the living room, the worn couch, the school bag stacked on the coffee table, the framed photos of birthdays and holidays covering the walls. For a moment, I hoped she'd see what I saw, a home full of love. But her expression never softened. "Children," she said briskly, turning to them. "My name is Miss Turner. I'm here to make sure everything is okay with you. I'd like to ask each of you some questions." Matthew stood immediately, his protective stance back in place. "We're fine. We don't need anyone asking questions." Claire clung to my sleeve, her wide eyes darting from me to Miss Turner. Sam looked down at his plate, his fork frozen midair. I forced a small smile. Kids, it's all right. Just answer honestly. Tell her the truth about our home. Miss Turner began with Matthew, pulling him aside to the corner. I watched my grandson, my strong, stubborn boy, stand tall as she asked him questions. His voice was firm but sharp, like every word was a shield. She's been our mom for 13 years, I heard him say. She raised us. She never kidnapped us. If you take us away from her, it'll ruin everything. My heart swelled with pride and fear all at once. Then it was Clay's turn. My sweet, sensitive girl clutched her drawing pad the whole time, answering with trembling honesty. Grandma loves us. She makes us pancakes on Saturdays. She tucks us in every night. If you take us away, who will do that? Her little voice cracked, and I wanted to scoop her up and hide her from the world. Finally, Sam. My quiet boy. He barely spoke above a whisper, but every word carried weight. She's our home. Don't take us from her. Miss Turner scribbled notes, her face unreadable. When she finally turned back to me, I held my breath. Thank you, Mrs. Carter, she said. I've heard what the children have to say. But you need to understand, without legal guardianship, their placement is in question. The next step will be a custody hearing. Custody hearing. The words felt like a sentence. When? I asked, my voice shaking. Soon, she replied. You'll receive official notice. Until then, the children remain here. But be aware, their biological mother has rights. And if she pushes for it, the court will have to listen. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Miss Turner gave a polite nod and left, her heels clicking against the porch like the tolling of a bell. The silence she left behind was unbearable. Claire burst into tears, burying her face in my lap. They can't take us, Grandma. Please don't let them. Matthew paced the room, fists clenched. This is messed up. She abandoned us. How can they even consider giving us back to her? Sam sat quietly, staring at the door. What if they make us go? I stroked his hair, forcing strength I didn't feel. I won't let that happen. Not without a fight. The next morning, I started making calls. I called the pediatrician, the school, even the pastor at our church. Each one promised to vouch for me, to write letters, to testify if needed. You've been those kids' whole world, the pastor told me. Anyone can see that. I spent hours at the library, researching custody laws, scribbling notes until my hand ached. The legal language was overwhelming, but I learned one important truth. Without formal guardianship papers, my case was weak. I needed a lawyer, but lawyers cost money, money I didn't have. My stomach twisted as I thought of bills already piling up. That's when Matthew stepped in. He overheard me on the phone, frustration in my voice, and he came into the kitchen with that determined look he got from his grandfather. Grandma, he said, we'll help. I can get a part-time job. Claire can babysit. We'll figure it out together. Tay stung my eyes. You shouldn't have to worry about this. You should just be kids. But Matthew shook his head. We're not just kids anymore. We're a family. And families fight for each other. In that moment, I realized how much they had grown. They weren't just children I had raised. They were strong, resilient young people, ready to stand beside me. It gave me hope. For a few days, things settled into an uneasy calm. We went to school and work, ate dinner together, tried to pretend everything was normal. But the fear lingered like a shadow. Every time a car slowed outside, Claire flinched. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped. One evening, I found Sam in the garage, tinkering with an old radio. His small hands worked carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. What you making, sweetheart? I asked. He looked up with a shy smile. A backup radio. In case we ever need help and the phone doesn't work. Taze pricked my eyes. Even at 13, his mind was on protecting us. I hugged him tight. You're amazing, Sam. That night, as I tucked them in, I whispered the same promise I had for 13 years. No matter what happens, I won't stop fighting for you. But peace never lasts long in a storm. 2 days later, as I walked home from the diner after my shift, I saw a figure waiting on my porch. Even from a distance, my stomach twisted. Emily. She leaned against the railing, her arms crossed, a smug look on her face. What are you doing here? I asked cautiously, clutching my coat tighter around me. She smirked. Thought I'd stop by and see my kids. My lawyer says I have every right. My blood ran cold. Lawyer. That's right, she said, her eyes glittering. You're not the only one preparing for court. I'm going to win them back, Mum. And when I do, you'll regret ever standing in my way. Before I could respond, the front door opened. Matthew stepped out, his eyes narrowing when he saw her. What do you want? Emily smiled sweetly, her voice dripping with false warmth. I just came to see my babies. Matthew's jaw clenched. We're not your babies anymore. You gave that up. Her face darkened. You'll see. Soon, you won't have a choice. And with that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement like a countdown to disaster. I stood frozen, the weight of her threat settling like lead in my chest. The storm wasn't just coming, it was already here. And the next blow was going to be worse than anything we'd faced yet. The courtroom was filled with tension. The air felt heavy, as if everyone inside was holding their breath. I sat there, my hands trembling slightly, but I tried to hide it. On my left sat my lawyer, Mr. Green, a kind man with gray hair and glasses who had been patient enough to listen to every detail of my life with the kids. On my right, I could see the 3 children, now young adults, sitting together. They were old enough to understand what was happening, but still scared. And across from me was my daughter, Emily. 13 years had gone by since the day she left her children on my doorstep and disappeared. 13 years of birthdays, scraped knees, homework, heartbreaks, and endless nights of making sure the children had what they needed. And now, here she was, dressed neatly in a navy blue dress, pretending to be the victim. She looked at me not with guilt, but with anger. She had filed the case accusing me of kidnapping her children all those years ago. The judge, an older man with kind but serious eyes, looked at Emily first. Ms. Carter, he said, you claim your mother kidnapped your 3 children over a decade ago. Can you explain why you never reported this earlier? Emily's voice was steady, almost rehearsed. Your Honor, I was young and scared. I thought my children were safe with my mother. But over the years, she refused to give them back. She kept them from me, brainwashed them, and made them hate me. I didn't come forward sooner because I didn't know how. But I want my children back. The words hit me like a dagger. Brainwashed. Made them hate her. I looked at the children, and they shook their heads slowly, their eyes filled with disbelief. My lawyer stood up. Your Honor, I have evidence to show that Mrs. Carter has raised these children alone for 13 years. She provided them with schooling, health care, and emotional support. We also have witnesses, neighbors, teachers, and even church members who can testify that the mother abandoned her kids. The judge nodded, but he kept his expression neutral. That was his job. He turned to me. Mrs. Carter, you may speak. I stood slowly, my knees weak but my voice strong. Your Honor, I never kidnapped anyone. The night Emily left, she said she needed space. She dropped off the kids with only a few clothes. She never called, never wrote, never visited. I raised them because I couldn't bear to see them suffer. I am not perfect, but I have loved them with everything I had. For a moment, the courtroom was quiet. I thought maybe, just maybe, the truth would be clear. But then Emily spoke again. She's lying, she shouted, her face red. I called so many times. She blocked me. She hid the children. She told them I was dead. That's why they hate me. She wanted them to herself. Gasps spread across the courtroom. My lawyer objected, demanding proof. But Emily sat back in her chair, confident. That was the less extreme moment, the calm before the storm. Because what came next would shake me in ways I never thought possible. The judge asked for a short break, and we all stepped out of the courtroom. I walked to the hallway with the kids, who surrounded me protectively. Grandma, don't worry, said Hannah, the oldest. We'll tell them the truth. She can't just lie and get away with it. I smiled weakly, but inside I was afraid. Courts didn't always work on love or truth. they worked on evidence. And Emily seemed to have prepared her story well. When we went back inside, the judge asked Emily if she had any witnesses. I expected none. After all, who could she possibly bring? She had abandoned the children. But then, the door opened. A man walked in, tall, with sharp features and a smug look on his face. My heart dropped when Emily introduced him. "This is Mark," she said. "My longtime partner. He was there when I tried to get my kids back, but my mother refused. He can testify." The courtroom murmured. The children's faces turned pale. I clenched my fists, because I knew exactly who Mark was. He wasn't some loving partner. He was the reason Emily left in the first place. He was a controlling man, someone who never wanted responsibility, someone who had once shouted at the children for crying too loudly. And now, he was here to back up Emily's lies. The judge allowed him to speak, and his words were smooth like poison. "Your Honor, I saw Emily cry for her children. She begged her mother to let her take them back. But her mother wouldn't allow it. She wanted to keep them for herself. Emily tried so many times. She's a good mom. She just wants her kids." My chest tightened. Lies upon lies. The children whispered angrily among themselves. They wanted to scream the truth, but my lawyer placed a hand on my arm, silently telling me to stay calm. But how could I? The courtroom had just turned against me, and then the judge leaned forward, his voice stern. "Mrs. Carter, these are very serious accusations. If it is proven that you intentionally kept these children from their mother, you could face charges. Do you understand that?" The words thundered in my ears. My vision blurred for a moment. Charges. Jail. Losing the kids I had raised for 13 years. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. That was when Hannah stood up suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. "She's lying. Mom left us. She left us with nothing. Grandma raised us, not her. Ask her where she was on my 10th birthday. Ask her where she was when I broke my arm. Ask her where she was when I graduated high school." The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" But Hannah didn't stop. Her voice grew louder, stronger, filled with years of bottled-up pain. "She doesn't even know who we are anymore. She doesn't know our favorite foods, our friends, or our dreams. Grandma does. She's our real mom." Tears streamed down my face as the courtroom erupted in chaos. The judge ordered a recess to calm everyone down. But as I sat there, holding my grandchildren close, I realized the fight was far from over. Because Emily wasn't done. She leaned across the aisle, her voice a venomous whisper only I could hear. "You're going to lose them, Mom. I'll make sure of it." And at that moment, I knew something darker was coming. Something worse than just lies in a courtroom. Because Emily was willing to destroy me, even if it meant destroying her own children too. The recess felt like a storm brewing outside the courthouse walls. Everyone was buzzing with whispers, their eyes darting between me, Emily, and the children. I could feel the tension pressing down on my shoulders as I sat on the wooden bench in the hallway, clutching Hannah's hand. She squeezed my palm tightly. "Grandma, don't worry. We'll fight this. We're not going to let her win." But my heart still trembled. Emily's words from earlier echoed in my ears. "You're going to lose them, Mom. I'll make sure of it." It was no longer about custody or truth. It was about revenge. Mr. Green, my lawyer, leaned against the wall, taking off his glasses and cleaning them with his handkerchief. "She's playing dirty," he muttered. "That man, Mark, his trouble. I've seen his type before. Smooth talker, no real evidence, but just enough charm to confuse a jury." I swallowed hard. "What can we do?" Mr. Green gave me a tired smile. "We don't panic. We build our case stronger. We bring our own witnesses. Teachers, doctors, neighbors, people who saw the truth." That was the less extreme moment, the calm, logical planning. But deep down, I knew Emily wouldn't stop at lies. When the break ended, we all filed back into the courtroom. Emily sat straight, chin lifted, as though she'd already won. Mark smiled like a man who had just placed the winning bet at a casino. The judge asked for the next witness. Emily leaned over to whisper something to her lawyer, and then, with a sly smile, her attorney called out a name. "Your Honor, would like to call Mrs. Jackson." My stomach dropped. Mrs. Jackson was our old neighbor. She had lived down the street for years. She wasn't cruel, but she was nosy, always watching through her curtains and gossiping with others. If Emily had gotten to her, this could mean trouble. Mrs. Jackson shuffled in, holding her purse close. She glanced at me but quickly looked away. Emily's lawyer asked the first question. Mrs. Jackson, did you ever see Emily visit her children? Mrs. Jackson hesitated, then nodded. Yes, once or twice. She came by. She was upset. She wanted to see them, but her mother didn't make it easy. The courtroom gasped. My heart pounded. I wanted to shout, "That's not true," but I bit my tongue. Mr. Green leaned forward, his pen tapping the table. Did you ever see Emily take the children? Did you see her being refused entry? He asked during cross-examination. Mrs. Jackson fidgeted. No. But I heard stories. Stories, Mr. Green repeated. Not facts. She lowered her head. No facts. Still, the damage was done. Emily smiled, satisfied. The judge sighed. Let's continue. The hours dragged on. Witness after witness came. Some supported Emily, some supported me. It felt like a tug-of-war, each side pulling harder, trying to prove their version of the truth. Finally, it was late afternoon when the judge decided to adjourn for the day. We will continue tomorrow morning, he announced, banging the gavel. Everyone stood, but Emily lingered behind. As we walked out, she followed close, her voice dripping with venom. You think you can win with pity? Just wait. I've got more. And when I'm done, you won't just lose the kids, you'll lose everything. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a fight for custody. It was a war Emily intended to win at any cost. We drove home in silence, the kids staring out the car windows. Finally, Jacob, the middle child, spoke. Grandma, why is she doing this? Why is Mom acting like this? I swallowed hard. Because sometimes, people are too ashamed of their past. Instead of admitting their mistakes, they blame others. But she's our mom, whispered Lily, the youngest. Why would she want to hurt us too? I didn't have an answer. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the day in my mind, each word, each glance, each lie. The fear of losing the kids gnawed at me. They weren't just my grandchildren, they were my life. The next morning, we returned to court. But before the session even began, something shocking happened. As we walked through the courthouse doors, a reporter rushed up with a microphone. Cameras flashed. Mrs. Carter, is it true you kidnapped your daughter's children? How do you respond to the accusations? I froze, blinded by the camera lights. Reporters, how did they find out? Emily stood nearby, pretending to be distressed, her lawyer shielding her like she was the victim of a crime. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue dramatically as cameras snapped her picture. The children huddled close to me, frightened. This was Emily's doing. She had leaked the case to the press. And now, the whole town, and maybe the whole country, would hear her twisted version of the story. That was the extreme event that closed the day. Emily hadn't just dragged me into court. She had dragged me into the public eye, where rumors spread like wildfire and lies could ruin everything. And as the reporters shouted questions, the only thought in my mind was, how do you fight a war when the world already thinks you're guilty? The flashing lights from the cameras stayed in my eyes long after we left the courthouse steps. That walk through the reporters felt like walking through a storm I never asked for. Their voices blended into one, shouting words like kidnapper, custody, stolen children. I held onto Hannah's hand as tightly as I could, while Jacob and Lily walked pressed against my sides. By the time we got into the car, Jacob slammed the door shut and shouted, "This is insane. She called the news on us. Grandma, she wants everyone to hate you." I tried to stay calm, but my hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. I know, sweetheart, but we have to stay strong. If we lose our temper, if we act out, it only makes us look bad. Hannah leaned forward from the back seat, her voice steady but angry. She doesn't just want the court to believe her. She wants the whole world to believe her lies. And she was right. That night, the news stations ran with the story. I sat in the living room with the kids, watching the screen as Emily's face appeared, crying softly into the cameras. She spoke in a gentle, broken voice. My mother took my children from me. I begged for years, but she refused. I just want to be a mom again. Is that too much to ask? The anchor nodded sympathetically, treating her like a hero fighting against injustice. And then the screen showed me, well, not me directly, but a blurry photo the reporters had taken outside the courthouse. The anchor's words made my stomach twist. Local grandmother accused of holding her daughter's children for over a decade. Did she cross the line from caregiver to kidnapper? I turned off the TV immediately. The silence in the room was louder than any noise. Lily's voice broke it. Grandma, are people going to think you're bad now? My heart shattered. No, sweetheart. People who matter know the truth. That's what counts. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of doubt pressing in. What if the judge saw those headlines? What if the jury was swayed? That was the low moment, the quiet pain of being judged by strangers who didn't know the truth. The next day, it only got worse. When we went to the grocery store, people stared. A woman whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "That's her. The one who stole her daughter's kids." A man muttered, "Shameful. Old lady keeping kids like hostages." Jacob's face turned red with anger. He wanted to defend me, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't. Just let it go." But how could I let it go when the whole town was turning against me? That evening, Mr. Green came by the house. He brought folders, notes, and a plan. "We need to counter this," he said firmly. "Emily's using the media, but we don't need to stoop to her level. What we do need is stronger evidence. Something that makes her lies collapse." Hannah leaned forward. "Like what?" Mr. Green adjusted his glasses. "Phone records, bank statements, medical records. If she really tried to contact you all those years, there should be proof. If she sent money, made visits, called, there should be a trail. But if she didn't, that silence will speak louder than words." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. We spent hours gathering what we could. I dug through old folders, boxes in the attic, drawers stuffed with papers, report cards, doctor's notes, photographs, proof of a life built without Emily. At one point, Lily pulled out an old birthday card she had made when she was 7. In big, uneven letters it said, "Happy birthday, Grandma. You're the best mom ever." She looked at me shyly. "Do you think this will help?" I hugged her tight. "More than you know." The next morning, Mr. Green filed a motion to include this evidence in court. But Emily, as always, was one step ahead. When we arrived at the courthouse, reporters swarmed again, their cameras flashing. But this time, Emily wasn't crying. She was smiling. She held up a stack of papers proudly for the cameras. Her lawyer announced it loud enough for everyone to hear. "We have proof that Emily tried to contact her children. Letters, emails, and voicemails that her mother kept from them. Proof that the grandmother isolated the children and made them believe their mother didn't care." My knees nearly buckled. Letters, emails, voicemails, that was impossible. Inside the courtroom, Emily's lawyer handed the judge a thick folder. I watched in horror as the judge flipped through the papers. "Mrs. Jackson, did you ever see Emily visit her children?" Mrs. Jackson hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, once or twice. She came by. She was upset. She wanted to see them, but her mother didn't make it easy." The courtroom gasped. My heart pounded. I wanted to shout, "That's not true," but I bit my tongue. Mr. Green leaned forward, his pen tapping the table. "Did you ever see Emily take the children? Did you see her being refused entry?" he asked during cross-examination. Mrs. Jackson fidgeted. "No, but I heard stories." "Stories," Mr. Green repeated. "Not facts." She lowered her head. "No facts." Still, the damage was done. Emily smiled, satisfied. The judge sighed. "Let's continue." The hours dragged on. Witness after witness came. Some supported Emily, some supported me. It felt like a tug-of-war, each side pulling harder, trying to prove their version of the truth. Finally, it was late afternoon when the judge decided to adjourn for the day. "We will continue tomorrow morning," he announced, banging the gavel. Everyone stood, but Emily lingered behind. As we walked out, she followed close, her voice dripping with venom. You think you can win with pity? Just wait. I've got more. And when I'm done, you won't just lose the kids, you'll lose everything. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a fight for custody. It was a war Emily intended to win at any cost. We drove home in silence, the kids staring out the car windows. Finally, Jacob, the middle child, spoke. Grandma, why is she doing this? Why is Mom acting like this? I swallowed hard. Because sometimes, people are too ashamed of their past. Instead of admitting their mistakes, they blame others. But she's our mom, whispered Lily, the youngest. Why would she want to hurt us too? I didn't have an answer. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the day in my mind, each word, each glance, each lie. The fear of losing the kids gnawed at me. They weren't just my grandchildren, they were my life. The next morning, we returned to court. But before the session even began, something shocking happened. As we walked through the courthouse doors, a reporter rushed up with a microphone. Cameras flashed. Mrs. Carter, is it true you kidnapped your daughter's children? How do you respond to the accusations? I froze, blinded by the camera lights. Reporters, how did they find out? Emily stood nearby, pretending to be distressed, her lawyer shielding her like she was the victim of a crime. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue dramatically as cameras snapped her picture. The children huddled close to me, frightened. This was Emily's doing. She had leaked the case to the press. And now, the whole town, and maybe the whole country, would hear her twisted version of the story. That was the extreme event that closed the day. Emily hadn't just dragged me into court. She had dragged me into the public eye, where rumors spread like wildfire and lies could ruin everything. And as the reporters shouted questions, the only thought in my mind was, how do you fight a war when the world already thinks you're guilty? The flashing lights from the cameras stayed in my eyes long after we left the courthouse steps. That walk through the reporters felt like walking through a storm I never asked for. Their voices blended into one, shouting words like kidnapper, custody, stolen children. I held onto Hannah's hand as tightly as I could, while Jacob and Lily walked pressed against my sides. By the time we got into the car, Jacob slammed the door shut and shouted, "This is insane. She called the news on us. Grandma. She wants everyone to hate you." I tried to stay calm, but my hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. I know, sweetheart, but we have to stay strong. If we lose our temper, if we act out, it only makes us look bad. Hannah leaned forward from the back seat, her voice steady but angry. She doesn't just want the court to believe her. She wants the whole world to believe her lies. And she was right. That night, the news stations ran with the story. I sat in the living room with the kids, watching the screen as Emily's face appeared, crying softly into the cameras. She spoke in a gentle, broken voice. My mother took my children from me. I begged for years, but she refused. I just want to be a mom again. Is that too much to ask? The anchor nodded sympathetically, treating her like a hero fighting against injustice. And then the screen showed me, well, not me directly, but a blurry photo the reporters had taken outside the courthouse. The anchor's words made my stomach twist. Local grandmother accused of holding her daughter's children for over a decade. Did she cross the line from caregiver to kidnapper? I turned off the TV immediately. The silence in the room was louder than any noise. Lily's voice broke it. Grandma, are people going to think you're bad now? My heart shattered. No, sweetheart. People who matter know the truth. That's what counts. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of doubt pressing in. What if the judge saw those headlines? What if the jury was swayed? That was the low moment, the quiet pain of being judged by strangers who didn't know the truth. The next day, it only got worse. When we went to the grocery store, people stared. A woman whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "That's her. The one who stole her daughter's kids." A man muttered, "Shameful. Old lady keeping kids like hostages." Jacob's face turned red with anger. He wanted to defend me, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't. Just let it go." But how could I let it go when the whole town was turning against me? That evening, Mr. Green came by the house. He brought folders, notes, and a plan. "We need to counter this," he said firmly. "Emily's using the media. But we don't need to stoop to her level. What we do need is stronger evidence. Something that makes her lies collapse. Hannah leaned forward. Like what? Mr. Green adjusted his glasses. Phone records. Bank statements. Medical records. If she really tried to contact you all those years, there should be proof. If she sent money, made visits, called, there should be a trail. But if she didn't, that silence will speak louder than words. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. We spent hours gathering what we could. I dug through old folders, boxes in the attic, drawers stuffed with papers, report cards, doctor's notes, photographs, proof of a life built without Emily. At one point, Lily pulled out an old birthday card she had made when she was 7. In big, uneven letters it said, "Happy birthday, Grandma. You're the best mom ever." She looked at me shyly. "Do you think this will help?" I hugged her tight. "More than you know." The next morning, Mr. Green filed a motion to include this evidence in court. But Emily, as always, was one step ahead. When we arrived at the courthouse, reporters swarmed again, their cameras flashing. But this time, Emily wasn't crying. She was smiling. She held up a stack of papers proudly for the cameras. Her lawyer announced it loud enough for everyone to hear. "We have proof that Emily tried to contact her children. Letters, emails, and voicemails that her mother kept from them. Proof that the grandmother isolated the children and made them believe their mother didn't care." My knees nearly buckled. Letters, emails, voicemails, that was impossible. Inside the courtroom, Emily's lawyer handed the judge a thick folder. I watched in horror as the judge flipped through the papers. Pages filled with what looked like emails, all addressed to me, all begging for her kids back. I whispered to Mr. Green, panic rising in my chest. "These are fake. They have to be fake." He nodded calmly. "We'll prove it. Don't worry." But I did worry. Because the emails had dates. They had times. They looked real. The judge frowned. "Mrs. Carter, if these are genuine, this paints a very different picture." I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. Emily sat there, her face the picture of innocence. She even wiped a tear from her cheek, like she was the wounded party. The children looked at me, their faces pale. Hannah shook her head. "She's lying," she whispered. "She has to be lying." But lies looked so much like truth on those papers. That was the build-up, the slow tightening of the rope around my neck. And then came the extreme event. Halfway through the hearing, Emily's lawyer announced, "Your Honor, in light of this new evidence, we request immediate temporary custody of the children be granted to their biological mother until this case is resolved. It is unsafe for them to remain with a grandmother who has withheld them for over a decade." The words slammed into me like a truck. Immediate custody. They wanted to take the children away. Today. The judge rubbed his chin, clearly torn. "This is a serious request. But the evidence is compelling. I will need time to review everything. For now." He paused, and my heart nearly stopped. "For now, the children will be placed under temporary protective supervision. They will remain with their grandmother for the moment, but all contact will be monitored, and the mother will be granted supervised visitation starting tomorrow." The gavel banged. And just like that, Emily had won her first victory. The children weren't taken from me, yet, but she had been granted access. Access she could use to poison their minds, to twist the knife even deeper. As the courtroom emptied, Emily walked past me slowly, her lips curling into a smile. She whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "This is just the beginning." The silence in the house that night was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It wasn't the silence of peace, of comfort, or of rest. It was the silence of exhaustion, of questions lingering without answers, and of hearts too heavy to beat without trembling. The children were in their rooms, though I could hear the faint creak of bed springs and the occasional shuffle of feet. They weren't asleep, I knew that much. After everything that had happened, after their mother's accusations, the court's intervention, and the never-ending gossip in town, how could any of us close our eyes without fear of what the next day would bring? I sat in my chair by the old window, clutching the same teacup I had been refilling throughout the evening, though I had stopped drinking it long ago. The liquid was cold now, tasteless. My thoughts drifted endlessly, circling around the children, around my daughter, and around the future that felt more uncertain than ever. The court hearing was still weeks away, yet the way time moved felt twisted. Each day was both a blur and an eternity. People who had once been neighbors, friends even, now looked at me with suspicion. Some whispered behind my back, others avoided me altogether, and a few came straight to my face with questions too sharp to be disguised as concern. Why didn't you tell us sooner about your daughter? Do you really think keeping the children from their mother was right? Don't you think maybe you're too old to keep raising them? Their words stung, not because I believed them, but because they exposed the loneliness of my situation. It wasn't easy defending choices made over years, choices made when no one else stepped forward. I wanted to scream at them. Where were you 13 years ago when she abandoned them? Where were you when the twins cried through the night, when bills piled up, when I had to choose between heating and groceries? Where were you when I was the only one left to raise them? But instead, I held my tongue. I had learned long ago that silence often carried more power than any argument. The children's shaken faith. The twins, though older now, carried wounds I feared might never heal. 4 weeks after their mother's sudden reappearance, they had been restless, nervous, and uncertain. I remember one particular evening when Emma came into the kitchen, her small hands clutching her sketchbook tightly to her chest. Her eyes looked tired, almost hollow, though she tried to hide it with a faint smile. "Grandma," she whispered, "if Mom takes us away, will you still see us?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I froze, spoon halfway to the pot of soup I had been stirring. What could I say? Promises felt like fragile glass in moments like these. But I bent down, brushing her hair back gently. "Emma, listen to me," I said firmly, though my heart trembled. "No matter what happens, I will always be here. You are not alone. Even if she takes you away, I will fight to see you. I will never disappear." Her lips trembled before she nodded and pressed her face into my shoulder. She was too young to carry such heavy fears, yet life had given her no choice. Meanwhile, Ethan had taken a different path. He didn't cry or ask questions. Instead, he grew quiet, withdrawn in a way that scared me more than tears ever could. He stopped drawing, stopped playing soccer with his friends, and spent hours in his room, staring at the ceiling as though waiting for something to collapse. When I asked him about it, he shrugged, muttering, "Doesn't matter. Nothing we say matters. Adults just do what they want." Those words broke me. To hear such resignation from a child who should have been dreaming about the future, it was unbearable. My daughter's brazen moves. And then there was my daughter, the storm that refused to pass. She had wasted no time once the lawyers got involved. She began visiting places in town, telling anyone who would listen her version of the story, that I had kidnapped her children years ago, that I had brainwashed them, that I had cut her out of their lives unfairly. The audacity of it left me speechless. She spun tales of being a victim, of struggling for years to find her children, of finally gaining the courage to fight for them. It was all lies, of course, but lies have a way of taking root when spoken with enough conviction. Soon, I noticed the shift in how people looked at me. A few stopped waving when I passed. Some parents whispered as I dropped the twins off at school. One woman even dared to approach me in the grocery store, her voice dripping with judgment. "You know," she said, crossing her arms, "a child belongs with their mother. Maybe you should think about what's best for them instead of just yourself." I wanted to tell her the truth, that I had begged my daughter to be a mother, that I had prayed for her to stay, that I had sacrificed my own life to give those kids stability when no one else cared. But instead, I turned my back and walked away, holding my head high though my chest burned with rage. The court's shadow. The day of the custody hearing crept closer. My lawyer, Mr. Daniels, was a patient man, though his blunt honesty often stung. He had told me early on that courts often favored biological parents unless there was undeniable proof of unfitness. "She's already painting herself as the victim," he warned. "She did not provide for them financially, emotionally, or in any other capacity. It was my client, their grandmother, who stepped in. She raised them. She fed them. She clothed them. She ensured their education, their health, and their stability. And now, after 13 years of absence, their mother wishes to return, not because of love or responsibility, but because she believes it is her right. But rights mean nothing without responsibility, and these children know who truly stood by them. His words gave me strength, but the judge's face remained unreadable. The evidence. We began presenting evidence. School records showing my consistent involvement, medical documents proving I had taken them to every appointment, financial records showing how I had supported them alone. Teachers and neighbors had written statements about my role as the children's guardian. Each paper felt like a piece of my life spread open for strangers to examine, but I reminded myself, it was all for them. Haloy tried to counter with claims that she had sent money over the years, that she had attempted to contact them but I had blocked her. But when pressed for proof, she had none. Just words. Still, I could see the judge considering both sides carefully, and it terrified me. The children's voice. Then came the moment I dreaded most, the possibility of the twins being called in. The judge leaned forward. I understand the children are old enough to express their views. Are they here today? Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Daniels said. But we request that, if they must speak, it be done privately in your chambers to protect them from emotional harm. The judge agreed. Relief washed over me, though my heart still raced as I watched Ethan and Emma escorted to the back, their small hands gripping each other tightly. Those minutes felt like hours. I stared at the closed door, praying that their words would be enough, that they wouldn't be manipulated by the guilt of choosing between us. When they finally returned, their faces were pale but steady. Emma clutched her sketchbook-like armor, and Ethan's jaw was tight, but there was a glimmer of determination in his eyes. I wanted to hug them right then, but I held back. My daughter's outburst. And then, as though the day hadn't already been heavy enough, my daughter snapped. When her lawyer pressed her to explain her absence, she fumbled, her voice rising. I did what I had to do. I couldn't handle it back then. All right? I wasn't ready. But that doesn't mean I don't deserve them now. The courtroom went silent. Her lawyer tried to calm her, but she pushed him aside, turning to the judge directly. They are mine. She stole them from me. She turned them against me. The judge's expression hardened, his patience clearly tested. It was the first time that day I felt a sliver of hope. Closing arguments. Finally, both sides gave their closing arguments. Her lawyer painted a picture of redemption, of a mother seeking a second chance, of children needing their biological parent. Mr. Daniels countered with the reality that parenthood is not about blood but about sacrifice, responsibility, and presence. And then it was over. The judge announced that he would take time to review the evidence and issue a ruling in the coming weeks. The gavel struck, and the room emptied, but the weight in my chest only grew heavier. The aftermath. Outside the courthouse, reporters and curious onlookers gathered. Some asked questions, shoving microphones forward. Others whispered as I walked past with the twins. My daughter stood a few yards away, her face twisted with rage. This isn't over, she spat. They are mine, and I'll never stop until I get them back. The twins flinched, pressing closer to me. I held them tight, whispering, Don't listen to her. We'll get through this together. But inside, I knew she meant it. She wouldn't stop. She would drag this fight out as long as she could, no matter the cost. The long wait. The following days were agonizing. Each time the phone rang, my heart skipped, wondering if it was the court. Each letter in the mail made my hands shake. The twins struggled, too. Emma began drawing darker images, houses split in two, stick figures pulling children in opposite directions. Ethan withdrew even further, refusing to talk about school or friends. I tried to keep life normal, cooking their favorite meals, reading bedtime stories, encouraging them with gentle words, but the shadow of uncertainty lingered. Nights were the hardest. Lying awake, staring at the ceiling, I replayed the hearing in my mind. Had I said enough? Had I done enough? Would the judge see through her lies, a glimpse of strength? One evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, Ethan came to sit beside me. For a long while, he said nothing, just stared at the fading sunset. Then, quietly, he spoke. Grandma, even if the judge says we have to go, I won't forget you. You're my real mom. The tears I had been holding back for weeks finally spilled. I pulled him into my arms, whispering, Don't you worry, sweetheart. No matter what happens, we'll find a way. I promise you that. Emma joined us then, leaning against my shoulder, her sketchbook pressed between us. On the page was a drawing of the three of us, hand in hand, standing strong against a storm. That image burned itself into my heart. No matter what the court decided, I knew the bond we shared could never be erased. The looming decision. As the weeks dragged on, I realized the hearing hadn't been the end, it was only the beginning. The judge's ruling would change everything. Either he would confirm what I already knew, that I was their true guardian, their safe place, or he would strip them from me, handing them over to a woman who had abandoned them once and could do it again. The uncertainty was unbearable, but deep inside, a fire burned stronger than ever. I had fought this long. I had carried them through 13 years of storms, and I wasn't about to stop now. The final decision was coming, and it would either break us or set us free.